To look at you or look at the camera?
me.
Okay.
Now, what we've told everybody.
This is conversation.
Yes, it's conversation. If you say something, just say,
Yeah.
I don't want that on there.
Yeah.
And we'll cut it off before we do anything.
Hope I don't do that. I try not to do that ever in my life, but we'll see.
Before anything is sent out, when you get a final or semi-final product, you'll have an opportunity to review
Sure.
it and sign off. So we don't use you in the context of something that's not good. Go through real quick people we've talked to so far. You'll know some of them. I've already mentioned a few of them. John Williams, I mentioned. Tad Leithhead, who's part
Sure.
of the whole praise process. Joe Daniel, longtime historian. Chuck Clay, Mayor Bill Dunaway, and his wife, Dot. We did them at the same time. Johnny Isaacson, Mac Henderson was a longtime county manager here. Chet Austin founded Tip Top Poultry. Lindsey Tippins, Senator Tippins, Governor Barnes, Bill Shipp, you know that name's familiar. Buddy Darden, seven-time Congressman in Marietta. Mickey Blackwell, Lee Ryan, both of Lockheed. Jim Roden, Dan Cox, David Hankerson, Tom Scott, Fred Bentley Jr. Let's see what they had here. Earl Smith. It's Strand Theater now. Is it Earl Smith Strand Theater?
Okay.
I mentioned Bob Perlman, Bernie Brown, who's the guy that actually made Wellstar what it is today, from a little hospital to what it is today. Johnny Gresham, Malika Rivers, Tim Lee and Mike Plant, as I told you, and then Dion Bonner. So we've got a good cadre of people, and we will do the interview with you pretty much like we did with everybody.
All right.
Which is just start a little bit about your background, your family.
Sure.
Up until we got to this point. And it's in your book, but we'd like to hear you talk about it.
Yeah. Can you hear the back? Can you?
I
You
was
probably
just about to
can't.
ask him the same thing.
There's ambient noise coming from that room, I think.
And that's a mountain back here. If he can't hear it, the microphone can't hear it.
Okay.
We're good.
Very good.
So John, tell me about your life. Where
My
you were
life.
born. Yes, sir.
And
let's get
on
to who
October
you-
the 1st, 1940, I was born in Baltimore, Maryland, right down the street from one of the finest restaurants along the East Coast, Hausner's Restaurant. And all of those row homes in which my family, my mother and father had an apartment, had marble steps on the outside. You've probably seen photos of those of Baltimore days. And the rite of passage in my family and every other family that lived in those kind of apartments was that when the child got old enough to carry a bucket and a scrub brush, you were out there scrubbing down the marble steps and making sure they were shining and bright and the best, happiest steps on the block. And so that's where I was born, across from Patterson Park, where my family lived and I grew up. And then as time passed, we moved to a little further towards the northern suburbs of Baltimore, Parkville, Maryland. That's out near Towson, Maryland, which Towson, Maryland is where the college that I attended, Towson State Teachers College, is located. Prior to going to Towson, I was a student at Baltimore City College High School, an all-male high school, and ironically, it's built like a castle. It looks like a castle sitting up on the hill, so the name of our school was Castle on the Hill. But what the Castle on the Hill did for me when I was a student going to school there, this very, very high academic-oriented facility, had windows. And the windows, some of the windows, depending upon what class you were in, would look out over Baltimore Memorial Stadium. And I was a diehard baseball fan. I grew up loving baseball. In fact, from the very first thought I ever had about what do I want to be when I grew up, I think I answered second baseman whenever anybody asked me, because that's what my dad was, a professional baseball player, second baseman, and what I wanted to be. And I was a good little player in the Baltimore area. And in college, I went to Towson State Teachers College, graduated from there in 1962, and then went on to Loyola College. Then went into teaching. I was an 8th grade school teacher in the southeastern community of Northport.
Tell me what you before you finish. Why don't you go around and see?
If you can't hear that,
No, we'll take care of it. I just don't want it to get out of hand.
Are you still rolling?
Yeah.
Hi, neighbor. Hi, neighbor.
That's in the show. Closing credits, that's it right there.
Do y'all, unrelated to this, do y'all do much partnership with the Atlanta Falcons? Is that, I know they built their soccer field here largely because of you guys. So, but do y'all have any ongoing involvement with each other?
Not really. Not really. I mean, we admire what they've done. We admire their organization, and as they admire what we've done and accomplished, and but they are fellow professional sports enterprise people, as we are, and we understand the challenges, and we understand the needs to have the right folks working with you throughout the city, and I think we've both done that pretty effectively.
So what did you learn as a teacher that may have shaped who you are today?
Well, I learned as a teacher how very, very important the job that I had as a teacher of young 8th grade girls and boys, is this grade that I taught all of my teaching career, which lasted for about 3.5 years in Baltimore County, South Baltimore County, that the responsibility I had was to, at the end of the year, be sure that every one of the students I had in every one of the classes that I taught, 4 separate classes of people, youngsters, that I taught, were better at the end of that year and more advanced, and that I was able to impact them one way or the other, either with educational matters or personal matters or individual growth matters or responsibilities. And I tried to do that. And so that when they left my class, in fact, I created a unit on communication. I believe that for them, if they knew how to communicate effectively, even getting a job, a menial job or a more advanced job, and then they knew how to present themselves, how to look, how to dress, how to present themselves verbally, they would have a better shot in this world than some of the people who didn't do that.
So why did you leave teaching? Was it for the money or the change in employment or passion or what?
I loved teaching. I loved going to work every day as an 8th grade teacher. I loved it. But there's one thing that I loved more, and that was baseball. I always had a dream to be a professional baseball player. That never happened. But one day I had a free period. Instead of going to the teacher's lounge, I stayed at my desk and I hand wrote a letter to the owner of the Baltimore Orioles, whose name was Gerald Hofberger. He's deceased now, but he owned the Orioles. He also owned the National Brewing Company, so I knew him through a variety of ways without his knowing that I knew him. So the letter went to Mr. Hofberger. He passed it on to the then president and president of the Orioles, Frank Cashin, who at one time was an attorney in Baltimore and a sports writer, which is key. And Frank says, I don't know this young man, meaning me, from apple butter, but I know his family name. From my days as a sports writer, I know about the Schurholtz family athletic prowess. Because of that, not that eloquently written letter that this English teacher wrote to the Orioles, but because of his knowledge of my family, he said, let's bring him in. We've already interviewed 12 guys. We're not satisfied we have a candidate yet. Let's bring him in and see what he's got. I went in, I interviewed, it went quite well. The gentleman who was elevated, Lou Gorman, who was elevated to become the director of player development, was looking for this assistant, and he had been in the interviews of all the other guys. He said, after he interviewed with me, he was taken by what I answered and how I answered myself and the excitement and energy and passion that I displayed. And he said, I like this guy. And so about 4 or 5 days after that interview, they called me. And they offered me a job as the administrative assistant in player development with the Baltimore Orioles. Now, by that time, I was 2 courses shy of my master's degree at Loyola College in Baltimore. I was making $6,800. A pretty robust salary for a guy teaching school. The Orioles hired me for $4,700, making me the only human on planet Earth, male, teacher, to leave teaching for less money. I did it. But it worked out. As all my friends remind me, it worked out quite well.
So after Baltimore, what happened next? How long were you there?
Well, it's a funny story. my boss, Lou Gorman, who became a dear friend of mine, I mean, he's like almost like an older brother, second father to me. We had a great relationship. We really admired each other, and we worked well together, and it was beautiful. And I was, in fact, I was the only person who spoke at his funeral who was not a cardinal or a priest, and I was invited to do that. I felt honored and proud of that. But Lou said to me, he walked into my office one day, and my office, by the way, was in the bowels of Baltimore's Memorial Stadium. No windows, green military file cabinets all around all of the walls, linoleum floors. My desk was a portable typing table with plaster cast wheels on the stands. And if I needed more, I had to make sure I put the brake on, because if I didn't, my desk would start scooting across the linoleum. So if I needed more room, you know, those spring-loaded sides, if I wanted to put my files somewhere, I had to flip up the spring-loaded, put the files here. If I needed more room, flip up the other side, put my other files there. And this was my desk. Well, one day, I had all that set up, and I forgot to put the brake on. And I sit behind my desk, and I'm ready to go to work, and I'm ready to write this message or whatever, and all of a sudden my desk is going across the linoleum floor, and I'm sitting in my chair, and there it goes, and bang into the desk of my associate who was in the office. We were a small group, we worked hard together, and that was a funny story. So a couple of days later, Lou Gorman comes bounding into my office. He says, "John, good news, we're going to Kansas City." I said, "Lou, what's this we business? I'm a native Baltimorean. I went to high school right across the street. My family lives here. My friends are here. This is my home. I want to go out to Kansas City. They have cows roaming up and down the main streets. What am I going to do in Kansas City?" He said, "Oh, you'll love it. It'll be an opportunity for us to build an expansion team from the ground up, and we'll be involved in every aspect of that." I thought about it, and finally he did convince me to leave my hometown, to leave my family and friends and all of that. It was the best decision at that time in my life that I ever made in terms of business.
So what you do in Kansas City, and tell me about how that progressed up to the point that you had the opportunity to come down here. And in your book, my voice is going to be cut out of this, by the way. In your book, I'm not sure exactly how you described it, but the people at Kansas City thought you were stupid to come down to Atlanta. And we'll get to that in a minute. But what did you do at Kansas City? What was the progression you had in baseball?
Well, when we were invited to become the beginning staff of baseball operations for an expansion team, the Kansas City Royals, owned by Ewing Kauffman, a remarkable man, a man I to this day still admire beyond measure for who he was, what he accomplished in his life. Became a billionaire. Marion Laboratories pharmaceutical industry, or pharmaceutical company, was his, and he was a remarkable man, and he loved doing things for the city of Kansas City. That was his vision, to do better things for Kansas City. And to work for a man like that, and to be able to lay the groundwork, lay the cornerstone, if you will, for an organization, a major league organization, an expansion team, that's pretty profound and an exciting opportunity. And Lou and I took it and ran with it and hired people to join in with us, scouts and player development people, how we're going to get this organization started. We became the most successful expansion franchise in the history of baseball. Of all the expansion teams that had come before us, we became successful more quickly than any of those other teams. And since then, others have surpassed us in the quickness with which they built a championship playoff team. We were then the quickest to do it.
Obviously, you're well known for the number of consecutive championships. Did you learn a lot of that from your Kansas City experience?
Sure. I mean, every experience is a building block. I mean, once you start at this level and you go to a building an expansion team level and seeing it grow and seeing it develop and seeing the respect and regard with which a young and fresh expansion team is held in the industry, and we had that. In 1985, we won a World Series in Kansas City, and that was quick. We had won division championships and playoff games, but we hadn't won the championship until '85. And when we won the World Championship in 1985, It substantiated more the program we had in place, the manner in which we built the organization and strengthened it so quickly, and people in the industry began to recognize that. And I suppose that when the Braves were looking for a replacement for general manager, now at that time Bobby Cox had served as general manager in the 1990 season. He wasn't the manager, he was the general manager. And Stan Kasten made it clear that they were going to have Bobby remain in the dugout as the manager going forward for the future of the Braves, and they were looking for a general manager. And Stan was calling around to all the young general managers that he was aware of and said, hey, do you know anybody? Would you recommend anybody? And so on and so forth. So all of a sudden, okay, that's an opportunity. But why would I leave the IBM of the American League? That's how the Kansas City Royals were regarded. The blue chip stock of baseball is in Kansas City. And why would a young administrator like me be prone to leave? But as it turned out, the more I thought about it, and some circumstances going on in Kansas City, not negative, but just personal stuff that people go through, health and well-being and such, I began to think, that might be something that I should think about. So I did. I went to the president of our team, Joe Burke, and I said, Joe, here's what I'm thinking about. I'd like to have the opportunity to speak to Mr. Kaufman and get his feeling. And I did. We had a very heart-to-heart talk, a very personal, very emotional for both of us. He said, John, it sounds to me like you are so interested in pursuing this that I can't, in good conscience, stop you from doing it. I wish you weren't that sold on this opportunity or interested in it, but I hear it and I feel it, and I can't be the one that stops you from pursuing something that you might have that much interest in. So I did, and it turned out that I was the one that the Braves wanted, and they hired me. And I talked to Stan Kasten and Terry McGurk, and they're the people that I negotiated with and took the job. And we talked about the setup of the club, and I was asked the question by Stan, how do you feel about Bobby Cox being the manager of the team going forward, because that's what we intend to do. And my answer to Stan was, I'm not sure I would have any interest in this job if Bobby weren't staying.
So you knew Bobby from before?
Well, I knew Bobby. Bobby was working for the Yankees when I first met him. He would come in at the end of the season to scout our team because we were in playoffs against them a lot. He was a AAA manager, and they would send him out to scout the teams that were going to play in the playoffs. And I got to know Bobby pretty well through that. We would talk at the end of the game. We'd sit there and have a social drink or two and talk about the game, talk about the team, talk about the players, talk about everything. And we got to know each other pretty well. We were honest with each other and forthright. He was and I was, and so that was a relationship that just sort of began to grow. And then when I was hired by the Braves, and Bobby said to Stan Kasten how thrilled he was that I was named general manager, because that's the guy that he was hoping they would hire. I was the guy.
So how long were you actually at Kansas City? I understand.
23 years.
23 years.
23 years. From the time the expansion team was allocated, I was hired that first year and spent 23 years there. And the last 7 years, I was general manager.
Wow.
I was named general manager in 1981. And at that time, I became the youngest general manager ever in the history of Major League Baseball.
Describe your philosophy of management, how you build teams, how you build organizations. There's a lot of parallels between building an organization that's selling a product and building a baseball team. It's a leadership issue. Describe your philosophy about that. Well,
my philosophy, and I've learned it from a lot of really good people, my philosophy is that you look for the very best people you can find, bring them into your organization, demonstrate to them that you trust them, you'll honor them and the work they do, you'll support them, you'll give them a pat on the back, stand back out of their way, and let them do their jobs. And you always ask for good and honest communication from employee to employer, employer to employee. And we did that. I did that. Lou Gorman was the same way, my boss. And that's how we operated with people. And we were able to get a lot of people attracted to this expansion franchise that ordinarily would not have been if they didn't know that Lou Gorman and John Schurholtz were here running the Kansas City Royals. And then when I came to Atlanta, I just brought those theories and those practices, actually, with me to run the Braves.
And I said this to you in my memo or conversation. I think your book should be required reading of MBA students because it is a practical description of what leadership's about, as opposed to academic sort of stuff.
Right.
And
you're right. I mean, what we're talking about now, how to care for people, how to treat people, how to honor people, how to respect people, how to motivate people, how to lead people, how to communicate honestly with them as a leader. Your communication is so sacrosanct. If you begin to waver in terms of integrity in your communications with those people, they begin to distrust you, and it all fractures and goes away. And I've always believed that.
Well, let me interrupt. Just ask one question while we're on this topic. The year before you came to Atlanta, the Atlanta Braves finished like dead last, right?
They finished last 3 years in a row.
So now you've got this successful 20-year career, and you're being asked to come and join what they called themselves the Bad News Braves. The players did call themselves the Bad News Braves. There's something in that formula that does not compute for me.
Well, I came here knowing what the circumstances were at then the current Atlanta Braves. Finished last 3 years in a row. And in 1990, the only major league team not to draw 1 million fans to the ballpark. I'd made that decision to come here and take the leadership of the Braves baseball operations, knowing all of that, but with confidence and belief in myself and my ability to encourage people to come on board and work with us in the same way, that I thought we could do this. And we did it. It didn't take us but 1 year. We went from worst to first in 1991. I signed a couple of free agents. I signed Terry Pendleton, who was a key guy for me because I respected how he played. I signed Rafael Belliard because he could catch a ground ball, and throw it to first base accurately, which some of the guys in the past years weren't able to do. And then, of course, we had Mark Lemke at second base, and I signed Sid Bream as a first baseman. So first base, shortstop, and third base were new. I made a trade for Otis Nixon in the spring of 1991. He was with the Montreal Expos. We trained together in West Palm Beach, and he could play the heck out of center field. And we needed a leadoff hitter who could steal some bases. Otis did all of that, and we had a team put together. And our young pitchers now took them out. Wow, we can make a good pitch, and the ball is going to be hit on the ground. We're going to get a double play. We're going to get an out, and the game goes on. And this is what happened. And we end up going to the World Series, playing the Minnesota Twins. We were the outdoor world champions in 1991. We won all 3 games that were played outdoors. We won them. Unfortunately, 4 of them were played indoors in that bizarre facility they built in Minneapolis.
I was surprised in your book that one of the things that you knew you needed to address was the baseball field itself. I assume that was the infield you were talking about?
It was. When I was announced as the Braves general manager, I had a lot of people. I should back up a little bit. I had a lot of people in the game who were willing and glad to be mentors to me. I mean, they met me as a young executive. They knew they believed I was hardworking. They believed I knew what I was doing. They believed I would do the best for organizations, and they became mentors. And one of whom was Al Rosen. Al Rosen was an ex-major league player and was at the time the general manager of the San Francisco Giants. And one of the first calls I received, if not the first call, was from Al Rosen, who was a great friend of mine and cared about my advancement in this business. He said, let me ask you, John, he said, did I just read that you took a job with the Atlanta Braves? You left the Kansas City Royals to go to work for the Atlanta Braves? Did you fall and hit your head? He asked. I said, no, Al, I didn't fall and hit my head, but I gave a lot of contemplation, a lot of thought, and a lot of prayer to this decision that I made, and I believe I made the right one. He said, and then he started grumbling, well, he said, by the way, you got the worst playing field in all of baseball. And that's where that came from.
So you hired, what's his name? He's still there. Does the grounds work for you?
Ed Mangan.
Yeah.
Ed Mangan, I got to know Ed Mangan when I was with the Kansas City Royals. We built boardwalk and baseball on the outskirts in Haines City, Florida, just on the outskirts of Orlando. And we were going to train there because there were a lot of major league clubs training in Central Florida. Now there are none besides we, and we're no longer in Orlando, but we were the last team in Orlando, and the Tigers, Lakeland, the Detroit Tigers, training in Lakeland, Florida, and so there were a lot of teams there. So we decided to build a complex for our major league and minor. We built a dormitory for our minor league players. We housed them all there because it's expensive that in Florida that time of the year. So that worked for a while, but also the company, Harcourt Brace Yovanovitch Publishing Company, set up in Orlando, Florida, they were going to battle the mouths, Disney, to get the customers that they're getting, and they built amusement park. Roller coasters, rides, music coming out of bushes, music coming out of trees, beautiful landscape. It was gorgeous, and they thought they were going to knock the mouse on his butt. Didn't work. Did not work. And they finally folded up their tent, and that whole project went away, and in fact the ground's been leveled, and it's a shopping center now, what used to be Boardwalk Baseball.
Describe a little bit, if you wouldn't mind, how you managed to keep people focused on winning year after year after year, championship after championship after championship.
Setting.
You did something nobody else has ever done, probably will do.
Thank you. Setting the standards high, but also reminding them that they are empowered to reach those standards and to grow those standards and to make this not a one-year event. And so we didn't make it a one-year event. We won 14 consecutive division championships. Never been done in the history of sports. Baseball, basketball, football, lacrosse, you name it. No sport has ever had a professional championship team win 14 consecutive division championships. None. And never will happen. And the reason is because injuries, because of growing old, because of dollars you have to expend for your teams. You can't get those kind of teams anymore. It's impossible to do. We did it. When even then, at a time, people were saying you can't do this. And after we did it, general managers would call me and say, my God, how was that done? How did you possibly do that? We can't win one division. We can't get in the playoff once, and you did it 14 consecutive times. Well, we had a plan. We stuck to it, and we got the right players. We got the right leaders. We had Bobby Cox in the dugout. And when a general manager, myself at the time, and a manager work collectively and with such closeness, with an understanding of the kind of players we want, the kind of teams we want to build, and what changes we have to make each and every year, we averaged 10 new players during that run, 14-year run. 10 new players on average every season. So what we did, we decided what our new core going forward would be for these 2 or 3 years, and then we built around them by acquiring the players of the caliber and the makeup and the will to win and the champion spirit that is needed to have guys go out and win games for you and win pennants for you.
One of the things that I think I understand from your success was building a great farm system. So you're developing from within in addition to buying. Talk a little bit about your vision for the farm system or why it was important.
Mm-hmm. That's easy. If you're a small market team or even a middle market team, not one loaded with cash and loaded with expendable cash, if you're a middle market team or a small market team, you must have homegrown players, because if you rely on getting players who become free agents from very, very wealthy organizations, and you have to expend large sums of money for that one player, and you fill that one need, and you haven't had your pipeline continued to bubble up players who are champion caliber people, who are winners, who are dedicated, who can help you show your fans that it's worth them buying tickets for your enterprise, then it's going to be a short run. You can't sustain putting winning teams on the field for the money you're going to have to pay to find free agents from all these other major league teams unless you build and grow your own. And so we invested all of our passion, much of our money, most of our money in scouting, and scouting not only in amateurs in the United States, but in Latin American players and development. Finding those tools, finding those players, and developing their skills, and then finding out which ones made the best team each and every year.
I've facilitated a chamber event one time with Freddie Gonzalez and what's the guy's name? It's in Kansas City, I think, right now. Was on your
Dayton Moore?
No.
Dayton is now the general manager at Kansas
He
City.
actually bought
He
a-
was an assistant of mine.
He actually built a little company, if you will, in East Cobb. I can't believe I'm drawing a blank on his name. But anyway, he had not left the Braves organization yet. And I asked him what was the hardest part about building an organization like the Atlanta Braves. And without any hesitation, they both said it's dealing with the media. Talk about your philosophy in that respect. What's the role of the media in baseball?
Well, I'll say this. I mean, truth be told, sometimes the media are quite exasperating for someone who's making decisions and building something.
We're videotaping.
Thank you.
That's okay.
Dealing with the media. Take 3. Yes, this is my Hall of Fame ring.
You could, yeah, we're going to want a shot of that, aren't we, Ty?
Dealing with the media, to your question, can be exasperating, but it's also a responsibility that a general manager of a baseball team, or any professional sports team, has. You have to be able to answer the questions how they're proposed to you, and answer them honestly and forthrightly, and how you believe. And I did that. I didn't always like what they wrote about us. I didn't like what they wrote about me, but I could handle all that. But if to besmirch the integrity of our organization with innuendo and unfacts was very, very exasperating to me. And you couldn't battle it. You know, it was like dueling with windmills. You didn't have anything to fight. No, but because what they were saying is inaccurate and wrong and not based on anything other than their view of what they think this is. And so, anyhow, but I always had fairly good relationship, or very good relationship with most media people from around the nation and in our sport. I had no problems with them. And you know, sometimes every once in a while, when you're with one person for a number of years, it gets a little stilted, it gets a little stale, it gets a little like everybody knows what everybody's going to say or ask, and that's not healthy. But generally, as I talked about before, creating a subject matter in my 8th grade class on communication, I know how important communication is.
We talked about this at lunch, but I'd like to get it on tape. The story about how you were notified that you got in the Hall of Fame. That's the first time I've heard that story. And it's time that I've been trying to do is get stories which generate excitement and so forth and so on. Can you repeat that story?
Well, I'll tell you a story, and I'll start back a year or so before I was notified. A year or so before, 2 years before, Bobby Cox had been elected by to be in the Hall of Fame. And he was told by our then PR director, Brad Hange, he said, Bobby, have your phone next to you between 5 and 6 o'clock. And when that phone rings, be sure you answer it. So Bobby is down in the lobby with Ned Yost, his good friend, and some other people around him, and his phone rings. And he looks down, and he sees an area code and a phone number he's never seen before in his life, and there's no name attached to it because it wasn't in his contacts. And so he's worried about the call coming from the Hall of Fame, so he hits decline on his phone. And as fate would have it, the PR director, then Brad Hange, some time later got a call from Jane Forbes Clark, who was the person who runs the Hall of Fame and is the one who calls and advises people that they've been elected into the Hall of Fame. And she said, Brad, we've called Bobby, and Bobby won't answer my call. And Brad said, oh, no. So Brad was in the lobby, a big lobby down there, and so he came around and told Bobby, he said, Bobby, you're going to get a call from this area code and this number, and it's Jane. Be sure you answer that phone call. And Bobby did, and of course Jane Forbes Clark said to him, you know, congratulations, you've been elected into the Hall of Fame. Well, fast forward now 2 years later, and it's my class, and I've been not knowing, I didn't know this until Jane called me. And I'm sitting in my room with my wife is with me and our son who works for the Braves, Jonathan. He's there, and Brad Hange was there then still, and some other members of the organization, and wanted to be there because they felt confident that I would get the call. And the phone rang, and I saw that I knew what the area code was, and so I knew it was Jane. I answered it, and I said hello, and she said, "Hi, John, this is Jane Forbes Clark. I'm calling to inform you that you have been elected into baseball's Hall of Fame. And I look forward to seeing you at your induction at Cooperstown next summer."
What a great story.
And my heart wanted to, in sort of the pattern that's hitting right now, you can't see it, but that's how it impacted me. All of my life, I wanted to be the best baseball executive I could be. After I found out I couldn't be the player I wanted to be, my target was to become the best baseball executive I could be. And if I needed any other verification or validation, that call and this ring that I wear on my hand, which is my Hall of Fame ring, and I'll tell you a story about that. In the very first time I was invited to come to Cooperstown as an elected Hall of Famer, and I had my ring, and we have a photo taken at the end of the ceremony for the other inductees, and we gather down by Lake Otesaga with this beautiful background, and Bob Gibson, who's sitting on the end, great pitcher for the Cardinals for so many years, he says, "John, there's a seat, come sit next to me." And he sees the ring on my hand, because I had gotten my ring. He said, "John, I know you have tons of championship rings in Kansas City and Atlanta. You've got more rings than you know what to do with. You probably don't have a room big enough to hold them all. But you will never, ever put another ring on this finger, because this honor is the epitome of anything any of us who work in this business could ever achieve. Players, managers, coaches, executives, anyone. This is the highest honor." And it is the highest honor for me. And so I wear my ring proudly.
That is a culmination of a whole series of things that took place in your life and your career. Back home, somebody was keeping the fire going and taking care of the family. We've asked everybody, describe a little bit about the family that supported you, because I'm sure you traveled all the time. And at some point you come home and you want to see your kids and
Right.
your wife and have a meal, feel like you do have a home, not on the road.
That was probably the biggest challenge in my living my career as a baseball executive, as an enterprising baseball executive, as an energized baseball executive. I wanted to do my job. I wanted to be with the major league team when they were traveling to the West Coast. I wanted to go with the team to New York and Chicago. And I had to find time, though, to spend time with my family. My wife, Karen, has been the real general manager of our family. She's general managed our home. She's general managed our children. She's general managed our plans, and she's a remarkably astute person, smart as all get out, and a great golfer too, by the way. And she does all of that while managing the household and watching our children grow up and become parents, and watching their children come about. And we now happily, our daughter Gina and our son Jonathan, both married, have beautiful families. Gina has two daughters, Cameron and Riley, both at Soap Creek Elementary School in Marietta, where she teaches and has been teaching for quite a few years. And Jonathan, who works for the Braves as the assistant director of professional scouting, and his two sons, John Boland Schurholtz III, named after me and my dad, and his other son, Edward Jordan Schurholtz, 3 years old. So they're great families. We're delighted to have them. They live so close to us, 10 minutes and 5 minutes away, and that's so much fun for us. And we spend as much time as we can with them. But I had to, as a young man, that balance was very difficult to find. That thin line of balance. Are you giving enough time to your wife and your children and your life? And are you digging hard enough into your profession to get better at it and to make your enterprise stronger and more successful? That's a tough balance to strike. And I tried to do it as often as I could. I don't know if I always succeeded, but I felt like I tried as hard as I could to make it work.
On our phone call, when we had to reschedule this interview, we talked a little bit about something that's I think is kind of important, this whole business, and it's the role of friends in this game. If you read your book, you've got tons and tons of friends that were a part of your life. Want to talk about any of those folks? Who were the people that helped you get to where you are today?
Well, the people who helped me get to where I am today, I have to start with the Baltimore Orioles, my hometown team. I was an educator in Baltimore. I decided I wanted to apply for a baseball job. I was interviewed by the Orioles. I was hired by the Orioles. And the man whose name I mentioned earlier, Lou Gorman, he was the guy who was promoted to the director of player development, and he was looking for an assistant through all of this interview process and chose me. And like that, like the snap of a finger or the light of a candle, his relationship and my relationship grew like that, and we just blended together and meshed together so well. So Lou was really the guy who led me along the way, how he dealt with people, how he was still a reserve naval officer in serving his country and made time for that, and he cared for his family and he cared for his friends, and he was really, really highly regarded and well known and well respected. And that was a model. My first modeling that I could do was off of what Lou Gorman was and how he did his job and how he went about it with such kindness and consideration and regard for all other people. And that was a lesson well learned. And then when I left he and I both went to Kansas City, and then he left to become a general manager in Seattle. I was promoted to take the job that he had, and I spent years in that job in Kansas City. And then when I came down to Atlanta, the first people I met by phone were Stan Kasten, who made the call to the Royals to get permission to talk to me, and it had been given because of the conversation I had with ownership and others. And then I came down here, and Stan and I had we struck a chord with each other almost from the very beginning. I mean, smart guy, intelligent guy, hardworking guy, successful guy. And, every once in a while he's a little acerbic, and every once in a while he had a joke or two to tell. And it just, we meshed together like that. It was just beautiful. And Bobby, I mentioned before, how he and I, it was just simpatico from the very beginning. We were same kind of people. We liked the same kind of people. We wanted to treat people in the similar fashion, and we did. And we did. And so, but Stan was somebody who helped me along quite a bit. And for the last 10, 12 years or so, Terry McGurk has been our chairman and CEO, and he's been allowing me to grow in the organization and have responsible positions, and to the point now where I enjoy the vice chairman emeritus's role with a beautiful office in that stadium right over our shoulder over there, across the road. SunTrust Park, for now.
Yes, for now. That's right. BB&T. It's not going to be BB&T. It's going to have a whole new name, right?
We're going to have to replace an awful lot of signs.
Yeah. And stationery and so forth. So
yes.
As I said at lunch, there have been 3 major milestones that have and will shape the history of Cobb County. One was the Bell Bomber plant locating here. Mm-hmm. The second was a really visionary commissioner who put water and sewer system throughout the county, allowed it to grow. And then the third, and maybe the most impactful for our future, is SunTrust Park and the Battery. People want to know, tell me the story about that journey to start that project. You had an announcement on Monday morning, and then Mike and Tim took us through that journey, about picked it up at that point. But we are all interested in how you made that decision that you can talk about. Mm-hmm. People want to know. And so to me, that decision to come out here has shaped the history of Cobb County forever and the lives of people forever. How did that decision come about?
Well, it came about we only had one choice to make. We were not able to negotiate with the city of Atlanta well enough to convince them to offer us an extension on our lease at Turner Field. Our lease was expiring. And we have this commitment to Major League Baseball, that we're a Major League Baseball franchise, and we must provide Major League Baseball with a place for us to play our games. We can't just say, well, we're going to be Bingo Long's traveling all-stars and play everywhere else. No, we had to build a ballpark. And we knew that the city didn't have any intent or didn't have any desire to have us stay there. And that became evident. And then we had to make a decision, and through the grace of God, I guess, we were able to find a parcel of land right across the road, 92 acres, and that became shrunken because of when we started our building, we found we knew that 3 natural gas pipelines were under there. We had to move those pipelines to the perimeter, which caused a constriction of the acreage that we had to work with, but still plenty of room to do what we did, which was to build the most remarkable and magnificent and successful stadium and mixed-use development in any professional sport, period. No one has done this. The reason we know that, because all of them, baseball, basketball, football, collegiate, European, have come to visit our site at the Battery, SunTrust ballpark and the Battery. And what did you do? What made you think this would work? What went into your thinking? How did you manage to get comfortable that this was going to be a viable project? Well, we had a lot of faith in ourselves. We did a lot of due diligence. We hired a lot of smart people, as you know, David. We hired a lot of smart people to help guide us and lead us in the right direction, and it turned out so spectacular. It's a ninth inning World Series, ninth inning Grand Slam, game-winning World Series winning home run we hit.
There was a guy who passed away maybe 5 years ago named Otis Brumby, the senior. And I doubt very seriously that the Braves would be here right now if he were still alive. Because he hated government funding of anything, even good projects. He just absolutely hated it. Let's suppose that coming to Cobb County was not an option. What would have been your next choice?
Lord knows. We searched and scoured the available land in reasonable proximity to our fan base. And one of the things that really, really inspired us about this 92 acres that we found just across the street here was that it was right, here's where the most of 95% of our season ticket holders live, size of my hand, and that's where our stadium was going to go. If it had to go somewhere else, south or west or east, it might not have been able to function as effectively and successfully as we have. And with the state of Georgia putting all of their money into the road work, coincidentally at the same time, nothing to do with our coming here, but what did have to do with our coming here, when we announced, just a pure announcement that the Braves were moving to Cobb County, land started being bought up. Condominiums, as you and I talked about, started being built. Apartments started being built. And the most dynamic economic impact of any one decision announcement ever in Cobb County, I believe that's accurate when I say it, happened when we announced that we were coming here and all of this growth began.
At some point, it's go or no go. We all reach that, whether it's building a project. Yes, say it may be an easy decision, but it's go or no go. When and how was that decision? I know you got data coming in. You got a lot of stuff to look at.
Right.
But was it in a bar having a glass of wine saying, okay, are we going to do this or not? Or was it, and there's a lot of stories in management courses about people who started Southwest Airlines and drew a napkin on a bar and that became Southwest Airlines. When did the decision, the final decision get made? Because you also have owners, Liberty Media. And they obviously had to sign off on what you're doing too. Just talk about the average person would never know. This would be very interesting.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. The ownership element of your question is unique because not all Major League Baseball teams or football teams or basketball teams or whatever are owned by a corporate entity that requires fiduciary information being shared with their stockholders and such. And so we knew we had that responsibility, and we manage it in every decision we make. But we felt so confident that if we could get this facility built in this location, that it would be this. Now, we're not smart enough to say it was going to be this successful, but we believed that it would really be going in the right direction. And so did Liberty Media. Liberty Media understands that they have the right guys running this franchise. Terry McGurk and Stan Kasten before, and now Terry McGurk and Derek Schiller and Mike Plant and John Schurholtz for whatever role I played in that. But we were all in it together. We were in the boat pulling our oars in the same direction, knowing that where we had to go. And it's a funny story. We were sitting up in one of the office buildings across the street from what is now our SunTrust Park. And we're sitting at a long table and waiting for the owners who owned the land. They were from Baltimore, Maryland, ironically, my hometown. And so it was in the middle of the winter, and I'm sitting on this side of the table with my back to the construction site out the window. And in the door walks a big gentleman, tall gentleman, took his hat off, walks in the door, his eyes open up and his mouth drops a bit. He said, "Now I know who we're negotiating with, the Atlanta Braves," because he knew me. He knew me from Baltimore, and he knew my picture, and he knew. So that was funny. And we started, and we did all of the things we promised we would do. We had to make some adjustments along the way, and everybody who does a good project that works has to make some adjustments, and figured that those adjustments are appropriate and needed, and we did that.
Can I? Sure. Was there an instant? And he asked the question. Was it in a bar? Was it?
No.
What no. What was the instant at which you were able to look around the table and say, "We can do this"? And who was in the room?
Well, it was pretty apparent to us that we can do this. I mean, when
Answer to him.
Yeah.
well, it was pretty apparent, David, that we could do this because the people we had in the room, we were marching along shoulder to shoulder, side by side, all in concert with one another, knowing what we generally wanted to do. We had to build a ballpark so we could play our games, and we have an obligation to Major League Baseball to play our baseball games, or we'd be in violation of the codes. We'd be fined and wouldn't have a franchise anymore. So we had to find a place to build a stadium so we could have our team play games. But in the expansion of the concept, where we added mixed-use development coming out simultaneously, no one's ever done that until we did it. We built a ballpark and a mixed-use development coming out of the ground simultaneously. And there are many that wish they had done it that way, because even the grand franchises like the St. Louis Cardinals, they built a brand new ballpark, and they watched out their windows as people would go to restaurants and bars and spend their money on trinkets and stuff outside the ballpark. And the Cardinals said, why don't we should do this? And they built Baseball Village in St. Louis, adjacent to their ballpark. And others have done the same thing. But many of the Major League Baseball franchises have been motivated by what they've seen we did here and how it works. And we didn't raise a glass of wine and say, okay, we're going to do this, and that's where we did it, on napkins at a bar. But I will say this to you. After it was done and we agreed to do it, we did have a few glasses of wine raised in celebration for this great effort and the great results that we believe that we had accomplished.
If I'm listening to you correctly, the answer that we were seeking really evolved. You wanted to be near your fans. You wanted, I'm sure, quality of life. You want roads and access as opposed to what we had down there. And as you begin to take all of these factors, the answer, and of course there's another one, cooperation of government, it all sort of ended up being here as a product of meeting all these requirements. Would that be safe to say?
That's exactly right. We wanted to be closer to our fans, the fans who spent all of their money in advance by buying tickets to our games. We wanted to have access to our facility. We wanted to build a first-class facility, and we also wanted to provide our fans with an opportunity to come early and stay late, come to the Battery Atlanta, and buy and shop and enjoy and eat and relax and come to a game, stay as long as you like, leave whenever you wish, provide Uber service to our fans who come to the ballpark, provide local transportation to the ballpark, and we did all that. The challenge we had was finding parking spaces, as you know, but through good negotiation and communication, we found that. We jerry-rigged it together, and it worked fine. And I'll never forget, we played the New York Yankees in the first exhibition game at this new SunTrust Park. And I'm on the concourse, and the people are coming up to me, "Oh, Mr. Schurholtz, this is what Atlanta baseball fans deserve. This is what the Atlanta Braves deserve. This is beautiful. I got here in 15 minutes. I got from my parking place to my seat in 5 minutes. This is what we were hoping for."
Your vision of building a stadium with a mixed-use development was innovation. It's innovative, it's different. You've already talked about that. How did that come about in your mind? How did that vision get developed? Was it easy? Was it something you've always thought about doing? What? Tell me about that.
Well, it came easily to us because when we did our due diligence and went around and traveled, we traveled for 3 years to football stadiums, to baseball stadiums, to arenas in New York and California, and we saw how the people, one of the things they said, if they didn't have a mixed-use development or if they didn't have an enterprise zone to sell their product, they wished they had. And so it didn't take long for us to find out, wow, this is something that everyone overlooked, or they didn't have the space to expand to build that. We had the space, and we decided to utilize it effectively and productively, and we did.
You heard on the video, did you ever see a trailer video? I sent you a link to it. I don't know if you ever looked at it or not.
I might have, but I can't tell you that I remember it right now.
Okay. There's a piece in there where Governor Barnes talks about what he termed the Cobb way of doing things. It's the cooperation between the county and the cities and the business communities, between the chamber, development authorities, and so forth.
Right.
Very cohesive county with strong government, ethical government, and fairly easy to work with given the size of this county, 800 and something thousand people. The Cobb way had to have a play in this whole decision you went through, that you could come in here and work closely with the county, Tim Lee, etc., and get support, and it took a lot of support from a lot of people. But y'all must have felt comfortable. Cobb is a place I can do this.
We did. We felt comfortable, but we also felt, from what we had seen, it might be the only place we could do this, because there was no other community coming forward saying, we're ready to build you a stadium, no matter how far apart it might have been from this area where most of our season ticket holders reside. And that's one of the one of the thoughts we had to work with. But when we could tell from dealing with Tim Lee, and I mentioned Tim and I mentioned you at the Cobb Leadership Breakfast at which I was invited to speak, and because without that leadership that we've got from the Chamber of Commerce and from Tim Lee in his position as lead politician in the county, and you know, he suffered the slings and arrows of somebody who goes out and says, I want to put together this neighborhood and this community project combined and see if we can't make that work. And we did it. But without his leadership and leadership that you provided and others in our organization, we had a great team, a team that was probably looked like about this at the start, but at the end it looked like this. I mean, people who really wanted this to happen and really wanted to make this work and have a successful end to this mission that we were all on.
How did you keep this a secret? This is an age-old question everybody wants. How in the world, well, we talked about it at lunch. How did you keep the big secret?
Well, we managed to do it because we had to do it. If this had leaked out before we were ready to had all the T's crossed and the I's dotted and all of the documents in place, it would have been a disaster. Because we know the side on the people on the other side of this, the negatives on the other side, would have done everything they possibly could have done to scuttle this deal, and we wouldn't have had a shovel in the ground. So we had to keep it private, and we told everybody that this is so important that every one of you in this room who we're calling in to our inner circle needs to vow that you'll keep it a secret until it's time for it to be announced, and they did. If someone had left that out, it might have collapsed, but it didn't collapse, and here we have this grand project that matches any project of a similar order anywhere in the world. I mean, like I said before, European soccer teams have come over and looked at this. People in other leagues, professional basketball, football, other baseball owners have come here to see what we did and figure out how we did it and ask all the questions we've been talking about for the last hour or so.
During that whole process, were there some interesting stories that you could tell that the viewers might say, wow, I understand that must have been pretty difficult to have this discussion or just talk about this issue or whatever? Anything come to mind?
Well, I mean, one of the fun times, as I mentioned to you earlier, when we were sitting at the boardroom tables in one of the offices across the street from where SunTrust Park was going to go, in walked the person representing the people who owned the land. It happened to be a group from Baltimore, Maryland, and he walked in the door and he saw me sitting at the table, and he took off his hat, his winter coat, and he said, now I know who we're talking to, the Atlanta Braves, because he recognized me. So that was kind of fun. We all had a laugh about that. But mostly, this had a serious tone to it, because it couldn't be too much frivolity. It couldn't be too much happiness. We had to dig in and work extra hours, and I can't commend on our staff that were the Braves, Mike Plant and Derek Schiller and so many other people that worked at various levels, and our partners that we brought in to help guide us through this project in development. We didn't know anything about development. We just knew how to build baseball teams and baseball facilities. We knew what we wanted, but we had to have somebody partner with us on the other facets, and we did, and it turned out beautifully.
Would you mind saying a few other things about the Hall of Fame, which is, again, as I said earlier, the culmination of a lot of things that were associated with your career? Are there any stories around the Hall of Fame process that come to mind besides the calling the hotel rooms that you got? That's a pretty significant.
Yeah.
That's pretty significant. But
Yeah.
there had to be some fun things when you're sitting around the best baseball players in history, sitting up on that stage.
Well,
It must have been fun and scary and
it was.
prideful and all that.
Well, when you get that call and you're told that you've been elected unanimously, I was the only unanimous electee to the Hall of Fame in I don't know if ever in terms of the people, the committee that was electing we executives and we managers and we umpires and people who aren't players. There's a special select group of 16 people. I served on that committee for many years, and when it came time and I was eligible as a Hall of Fame candidate, they called me and said, I'm sorry to tell you, you're no longer going to serve on the committee you've been on for 3 or 4 years because you're not going to be on it. And I didn't understand that, and then I understood pretty soon that they wouldn't have somebody who might be elected into the Hall of Fame serving on the committee that elected himself. So I was off on the sideline for a couple of years, which is okay. I didn't put 2 and 2 together at that time. Some other people did, but that's kind of cute. But mostly it was just about receiving the honor and with great pride and great dignity and great respect for this industry, and knowing how much I regarded the Hall of Fame before I became a gleam in the eye of anybody at the Hall of Fame. I send money. I was a supporter of the Hall of Fame because I believed they presented our game on the best, the greatest and shiniest and perfect pedestal for the world to see this great sport at its highest possible position of honor in Cooperstown, New York. And I was proud to be a part of that, and I contributed for many, many years.
Can I ask one? This may be way off topic. There seems to be a push right now, and time's running out, for Dale Murphy. Is Dale Murphy going to be in the Hall of Fame?
I have no idea. I'm not on any committee, and I don't know. Dale is a favorite player of the people in this part of the country and of the Braves organization, even though he ended up with another organization for a scant few games or so. He's a wonderful man, deserving person, and I think he'll probably get his due consideration. Time runs out on all of the people who are up for Hall of Fame considerations that aren't elected by the writers any longer. It becomes the work of this committee we're talking about, and I'd be personally happy if Dale Murphy ended up in the Hall of Fame. I think he represents the kind of character and human being, caring, considerate human being who had great baseball ability and showed it for many, many years.
There are those who say he just didn't have the numbers. He just doesn't have the numbers.
There are those who continue to say that, yes, you're right.
This is sort of more a statement, but you may want to comment. When the Atlanta Braves announcement was made, a lot of us had to go out and sell it to the community, the doubters. Was this a project that was going to lose money for the county? Was it going to create a burden on our economics? And what we told everybody is this is a quality organization, and they're going to develop a quality product using a quality process. And that was something that you built, John. It was an easy sell. A lot of us went to meetings, and that was the easiest thing to sell. This is a quality organization. We can't answer all your questions right now, but it's a quality organization. They will find all the right answers. They will deliver something that's helpful to this community. And that was our biggest spiel, not return on investment and all that kind of stuff. This is a quality organization. It's going to build a quality stadium, and it's going to be good for Cobb County.
And I would respond to that by saying we vowed to do things to help the education programs in Cobb County, the police and fire programs in Cobb County, And we did. We have delivered substantial sums of money in each of the 2 years we've operated here, living up to our vow and our promise to support the schools, support the firemen, support the policemen, and support the entire Cobb County community in other ways as well. And we lived up to that promise. No one thought we could, or no one thought we would. Doubting Thomases. But we did, and we have, and we expect to continue to do that.
This will be the final question.
No.
Yeah, it will.
No.
As you, how do you feel about the fact that you're going to change history, or you did change history, putting this ballpark here, affecting thousands and thousands of lives? And when you go real fast, sometimes you don't stop to think about that. But how do you personally feel knowing you were a big part of putting something here that will change Cobb County forever, long after we're in the grave?
David, you know me well enough, David. I don't sit around in my office, at my home, with my friends, thinking how will I convince people how proud I am. I just am. I was proud to be a part of this team, and it was a team. It was a core team. It was an expanded core team. It was a team of people throughout this community who worked together, shoulder to shoulder, side by side, who knew and believed, as we all did, who were involved in it, that this was going to be what it has become. And we couldn't speak any more loudly or any more profoundly about that, or be any more certain about it than we were and we are today. And I'm happy to say that it has become every bit of that. And I'm so proud to be a part of it. Whatever my role was, whatever credit I get, I'm happy to have been a team member on this great team that got this project done.
Just one more quick question. You have referred to Tim Lee as the MVP from Cobb County. Can you just elaborate on Tim Lee's contribution to this process?
Well, Tim was the county commissioner then, and he was at the leadership, and the slings and arrows he suffered. I don't know how he made it even to the over the finish line of this project, but he was tough. He was strong. He believed, as we believed, that this was right for Cobb County. This would be good for Cobb County, and I believe Tim Lee was right. He gave up his political career, temporarily at least, here in Cobb County for that, but it was a fight worth fighting, he believed, and the people who were with him felt the same way, as did we. And we were so thankful for the job he did in his leadership role, and we love him and wish him very well.
And before we let you go, can you get just a couple of tight shots of the ring?
Can you just give me one of those?
Yes.
Hold on.
Yeah, that's
You see my bandage on my hand.
A little bit.
Right here?
Yeah, that'll be good. That'll be good.
And
my
one more-
cousin has 4 World Series rings.
Only 4?
Only 4.
For whom?
But they're the Red Sox and the Giants, which are kind of the 4 you want. So
What did he do?
I forget his title, but he's in the front office.
Oh.
He used to be a scout. His name's Keith Champion.
Oh, I know Keith. Yeah.
That's my dad.
Yeah, he's married. He's married to a gal. Oh no, not anymore. Blonde? Not anymore.
We don't talk about that. Ty's dad is the only member of his family that does not have a World Series ring. It's really good.
Oh really? Well, I've got several at home. If you know.
Can you take it off the tripod? And I would just love to get the shot of his hand tapping his heart when he's talking about the World Series, about the Hall of
I
Fame.
won't do that.
okay.
Actually, I had 2 questions from my dad, actually.
His dad has a
Just
fishbowl
tap-
this big full of autographed baseball.
Just tap your heart like it,
Like this.
Like that, yeah. Be sure to include
There
the
we
ring.
go.
There you go.
You want to know, like culturally, moving from Kansas City to suburban Atlanta, what were you expecting, kind of in terms of the community and the culture and everything? And
Well, it was not unlike the move I made from my hometown of Baltimore, Maryland, where I had lived all of my life up through my 26th year, when I was invited to join the Kansas City Royals as an expansion team. And I said, what do I want to leave Baltimore for? It's my hometown. And so the similar thing happened when I came to Atlanta, came to Kansas City and then was invited to join Atlanta. What was happening in Atlanta stimulated me and interested me in a baseball way, and that's why I did it. I thought they were on the brink of moving forward pretty effectively, because what they did is to dedicate themselves and invest in scouting and player development, homegrown players, knowing you could sustain that for many, many years. And as I did my due diligence, I said, this is an organization that's done it correctly. And I believe they have a chance to be a winning organization with the right leadership and the right philosophy in place and the right people working that philosophy as any organization in baseball. And so I came down here, I did my interviews, and I felt even more confident that with Stan's leadership and Terry McGurk's support and such, and Ted Turner's involvement at the time, so it was going to be a good place.
What do you think your best move was you ever made as an executive?
Well, there were several. I mean, the first best move was writing a letter to the owner of the Baltimore Orioles when I had a free period. Instead of teaching 8th grade English and geography, I wrote a letter to the owner of the Orioles, and it went to an executive who responded to me and invited me in to come in for an interview. And that was the first smart thing I did. The second smart thing I did was to realize that, going to the Kansas City Royals expansion team was a smart thing to do, because you'd be in at the ground floor, you'd have the cornerstone responsibilities of building an organization, and I did that, and I can't ever say that there's anything wrong with that decision, and it helped me grow in my career well and quickly. And then after that, I'm in Kansas City, the IBM, the blue chip stock of the American League, and I get a call from the Atlanta Braves, who are searching for a general manager, and I'm a young, successful general manager. Who do you know? Who would you recommend? Who are your friends? Who would you consider to recommend to the Atlanta Braves? And I began thinking about it, and then ultimately decided this is a job that interests me. I went to my organization. I told them they're interested in me. I like to have permission to at least hear about what they have to say, and they gave me permission. And I think at the same time said, don't let the door hit you in the backside when you're going for your interview. And so I came down here, and it worked out well, and I'm delighted. And here I sit here with my Hall of Fame ring on my finger, representing the Atlanta Braves and the Kansas City Royals and my original Baltimore Oriole team. And I'm as proud as I can be about that.
And you should be. You said something that reflects your baseball knowledge. When you and I talked a couple of weeks ago, I said, well, wherever you're going, John, I hope you go buy us a closing picture. And you said moving is a tough thing for these players to do. You forget that they're people too, and they have to move their families. Oh. And once they kind of get settled in, they will come back to who you thought they were.
Right.
And the last couple of ball games, they proved it.
That they have, and I'm usually always right about that, because I've seen it all my life, 53 years of this business, and I've seen the impact that emotions and humanness have on these guys that put on Major League Baseball uniforms for their work, for their jobs, but they have the families and they have the pulls and the tugs of life just like all the rest of us have.
Right. And it does affect you.
Yep.
You have to be really focused to hit a 100-mile-an-hour pitch that can move all different directions. You have to be your mind's got to be pretty focused on that little white ball.
It's called living in the present.
I say so.
Yeah.
I'd say so.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, sure. Hope this is